everybody, and welcome to Brain Balance Live. Each week we come together here at Brain Balance Live to talk to Heather Wells. She is an expert in her field. She is a board-certified cognitive specialist, a therapist. She has been the National Autism Summit speaker, so just a wealth of knowledge about neurodiversity and the different types of brains that we all have, really. You're a brain specialist, Heather. Can I call you that?
I'm good with that. Yeah. I started studying the brain in elementary school.
It always fascinated you?
It always fascinated me. You know, I wasn't into science fairs, but it was a mandatory science fair. And my first one, guess what it was on? That brain.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it has been a fascination my entire life, for sure.
I think it's really awesome that your fascination has become your passion, and you've brought it full circle with your brain balance centers. For anybody who's joining us for the first time, each week we take a topic and dissect it, and we get tools to help us with that. But right now, I'm going to ask Heather actually to tout the programs a little bit, because they've actually been recognized by some pretty huge entities. Heather, what have you gotten from these big entities?
Well, Harvard Medical School, in conjunction with McLean Hospital, did a 10-year study on our program, specifically with individuals diagnosed with ADHD, and reported the vast improvements we get in decreased impulsivity, hyperactivity, better attention, emotional regulation, memory, stress response. And yes, the results last for the whole time. They're permanent because they see the neural pathways that we create. Cambridge Brain Sciences has talked about the vast growth we get in executive function. And we were also in the Journal of Mental Health and Clinical Psychology for the improvements we get in mood regulation, decreased worry and anxiety, so forth, better mood. So a lot of prestigious organizations looking at this, peer-reviewed research, and everything we do, it's not anecdotal. It's all backed by research. So
yes, I absolutely love that. What really she has learned and what brain balance centers do is help you to train your brain kind of the same way you would train your body, right? Physically, we know that if we do physical workouts, we can change our bodies in a certain way to be stronger, faster, whatever things we would like to do better physically. We can do these same things with our brains, right?
Yes, we do an assessment. We're looking at multi-hundreds of functions, and we customize a program to see where each individual needs us to kind of target and stimulate the brain and grow new neural pathways. So
I just think that's so amazing that you have kind of the way that your brain is naturally set up, you know, that whole nature thing, you know, you're just born this way with different tendencies. But I think it's so amazing that you can actually direct and redirect those pathways.
yeah, I mean, and we've known this since the 1950s. When I was in grad school, I think some of my professors had not kept up with the research. And they were saying once certain things are set, they're set. It's just not true. Dr. Thomas Insel, he's the former director of the National Institute of Mental Health, in 2014 spoke at Stanford. He's like, people catch up with what science is saying, drive brain connectivity. And that's what we've been doing the whole time. So yeah, it's not only can we grow new neural pathways, but the brain wants to be efficient. So as we grow these new neural pathways and our students, whether they're kids or adults, use them, the brain starts pruning away maladaptive knee-jerk responses, you know, pathways that aren't serving us well, which helps get rid of negative rates of thinking and that kind of thing. But a lot of our kids have, I was just going to go right on into this.
Yes, I love this. Today we are talking about this topic, just kind of different things sensory-wise and within the brain between individuals and how they differ and how we attack them differently, right?
Yeah, so many times this is really about how often sensory processing disorder gets missed. It gets misdiagnosed as ADHD. It gets misdiagnosed as learning disabilities, as they're called in the schools. I like learning differences. I have families come in a lot of times asking me, do you think my child has autism? And it's based on the fact that they have sensory processing challenges. You don't have to have these other labels to have that, although they do coexist in a lot of cases. So sensory processing disorder gets misdiagnosed as a pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. Sometimes ADHD gets diagnosed when it's SPD or it's a milk allergy or food sensitivities. So it's really important for us to always pay attention, not just to the symptoms, but what is causing the symptoms? What is the root cause? That is what we're always focused on. And I even read an article, a really well done article several months ago by an MD, and she was saying, my doctor got it wrong. My son was diagnosed with ADHD. I wanted a diagnosis. I'm a doctor. That's what we do. And turns out he didn't have it. And anytime if you're looking at diagnoses and it's just based on a checklist of symptoms, we got to know why those symptoms are happening. It's just very important. Look at some of these examples that I put together for you. And this is not an all-inclusive list. But when you hear impulsivity, hyperactivity, distractibility, what do you think? The first thing that pops in your head is ADHD.
Yeah.
These exact same symptoms and many others, a lot of other defiance, a lot of emotional dysregulation, a lot of those things can be sensory processing disorder. So we know that hyperactivity goes with ADHD, but sometimes what looks like hyperactivity is it is bothering me that my chair has a wobble in it and I have sort of some equilibrium issues and I feel uncertain about that. Or I don't feel my body the way I need to, but when I run, I feel my body better because I'm getting the banging of my foot against the floor.
Right.
Same thing, tapping your fingers, turning cartwheels, any sort of sensory seeking that has to do with motion, swinging, twirling, hanging upside down off of furniture. A lot of times that is sensory seeking behavior related to the vestibular system, equilibrium, the sense of being upright and balanced. Impulsivity, we know that goes with ADHD. Sometimes individuals with sensory processing disorder might engage in what looks like impulsive behaviors because they are trying to escape a situation that it is causing sensory overwhelm. Emotions are the relay stations between sensory information, what we do with them. And when I get overwhelmed with sensory, it heightens the emotions. When my emotional brain's in charge, we all will become more impulsive to one degree or another. Look at these two boys. Here's an example. One boy, I mean, he's thinking about my phone, my video games. I mean, that could be any number of things, but that could be ADHD. But look at the one on the left. He's looking away. Maybe he saw a flash of something. Maybe he heard a noise. And then part of sensory processing is being able to filter out extraneous stimuli. Sometimes kids become distractible because their sensory processing might be accurate, but it's slow. And now my brain is bored, emotional brain takes over, and now I give into distractions. Or it's a distorted message that I'm getting. And so this doesn't make any sense. So it's not going to hold my attention.
Yeah.
But there's so many examples down here. There's a little girl pulling her pigtails. That could be a flat out tantrum. She also could be seeking proprioceptive input. A lot of times, body focused repetitive behaviors like skin picking or hair pulling do have a sensory component to them. Sometimes it's mine. I don't want to share my teddy bear. Sometimes there might be a tactile proprioceptive thing that I don't feel my body, but that helps enclose me in a space. This is my carpet. I can make sense of this carpet. I can't make sense of what's over there. So this is my area, my toys, and I'm not going to share. There's just so many examples. Sometimes like withdrawal, task avoidance, that can be overwhelmed with the plethora of sensory input that I'm having to listen to the teacher and look at the chalkboard and everything. Peace out. I am getting overwhelmed. Maybe one system works correctly, the other one doesn't. They don't work in sync. I'm living in a glitchy video. Blah, blah, blah. No.
Yeah.
But so many of these things, stomping, kicking, those could be seeking input. They could be that the sensory system overwhelmed me and now I'm in that emotional state.
Yeah.
So, and I showed this little boy here who has tears and blah. It's like, I feel like I need 4 hands. I'm supposed to look at my book and write things down. A lot of sensory motor processing, like planning, that kind of thing going on. This is just to get your mind open to the fact that we can't go by symptoms. We must know what is causing the symptoms, or else we start aiming at a bullseye to help a child and we're aiming at the wrong target.
Yeah.
Or you get one accurate yes, that doesn't mean you're done. There are so many co-occurring conditions. In fact, with ADHD or sensory processing challenges, most learning disability labels don't tell you why they have it. For example, dyscalculia, they have trouble with math. Yes, why? There could be any number of reasons why. I kind of just want to get across the point of look for patterns, log these things. What brings on these behaviors the most? How do they react to unexpected stimuli? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on. We're not going to go into great detail here, but I just want you to see how many parts of our cognition the sensory motor system is involved with. When I use visual perception and all my different sensory motor skills to walk toward the door and I predict when to reach out and grab the handle, I'm also learning how to predict what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next in the story. It impacts all areas of learning: attention, regulation, which we've already kind of talked about, picking up on cues. There's been some research done on learning loss as a result of the pandemic, finding that so much of that has to do with the virtual learning. Kids were not seeing some of the gestures that the teachers were doing that really emphasize points or demonstrate points. Time management. If I can't keep time in my body and I'm having difficulty planning those things, often these are the kids who they come in poor time management, can't prioritize, can't break things down. Time blindness that we talked about a couple weeks ago. But if I don't feel rough, smooth, hard, soft, silky, I miss out on a whole lot of descriptive vocabulary. I'm not in touch with my body, so I don't really get fast, slow, medium speed. But creativity, it even impacts digestion because our sensory motor system is tied to our nervous system. Our brain tells our gut how to process food. And the sensation of when am I hungry, when am I full, when am I thirsty, that is part of our internal sensory system. There are more than the big five that we learn in pre-K. So, all right, let's move on. But one of the pioneers in research of sensory processing disorder called it a traffic jam in the brain. And I think that is really a great description of this. But you think about, we have the five senses that we learn when we're young: sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. But then we also have internal sensations, including equilibrium, proprioception, which is body awareness. Both of those help me understand where I am in space, my body position. I just talked about the organs. So there are multiple sensory systems, and then there are multi types of processing within each of those. Modulation means, am I taking in enough input, or am I taking in too much? Kids who cover their ears when things aren't particularly loud, or gag at certain foods or smells, or they don't like to have their hands dirty. Those are examples of being oversensitive to a particular area of sensory stimulation. It doesn't mean that they would be that way in all areas of sensory processing. You can be sensory seeking in one way, sensory avoidant in others. Some kids get misdiagnosed with the inattentive type of ADHD because they're not taking in, it's kind of like they're oblivious to sensory input. Do you have kids who appear to not listen even if they know you're speaking directly to them, or they appear not to hear well even though hearing tests are normal? These are just examples. Discrimination is an accuracy issue. Dyslexia is a classic example of this because that is very based in language and auditory processing. So we have 7 auditory pathways in the brain that deliver different portions of the acoustic signal, and they arrive in the wrong order, so it becomes really garbled, and then that's how I smell, that's how I read. We talked on the reading show about how the visual perception can become garbled, eye tracking can be off, the eyes don't tune together. But sensory motor planning, a lot of our kids who have speech language deficits, the articulators have to plan what to do. It's called dyspraxia or apraxia of speech, depending on the severity. But we can also have that in our bodies. And by the way, there's a huge link between reading struggles, ADHD, and developmental coordination disorder. Again, showing you the link here with the sensory motor system. One way to know if your kids might have a sensory motor planning struggle with speech, for example, is can they fluently state kind of rote comments like, I love you, how are you? but when they are creating a novel utterance, they have trouble. That is a sign. But as I take in all this information from the external environment and process my internal sensations, goes through my brain's processing, goes through my spinal cord. If I'm able to organize and process the input and do it in a timely fashion, heart, brain, everybody's aligned. You're not seeing these emotional behavioral struggles. But if there's a breakdown in any one of these areas, that is when you see emotional, behavioral, attentional, learning issues. SPD is a leading cause of emotional dysregulation and behavioral concerns. And I already said that emotions are the relay stations. You can think about that. If you were stressed out, sometimes noises might annoy you.
Yeah.
And then the exact same noise when you're chill and everything's good might not even, it doesn't faze you.
Yeah.
And we don't have sensory processing disorders. Then amp that up for those who do.
Right. I can see too why like so many of the digestive issues that we have, if it's not disease related, like so much of it can be just, oh, I'm just not handling my life right now or taking care of myself properly.
A lot of digestive issues get missed because a lot of our kids, whether they have SPD, ADHD, other things, they might also have emotional dysregulation, anxiety. They complain of a stomach ache. It can look like they're trying to get out of going to school. Right. Or yeah, of course you do, because you're a ball of nerves right now. Mm-hmm. There really might be a digestive issue. If you see any sort of signs of motor issues that aren't working all the way that you can see externally, think about digestion. The intestines, that is also muscle control and breaking down foods for proper absorption. Yeah. 90% of our kids have at least a mild form of digestive issue or food sensitivity.
Wow.
And many times it is not obvious.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So what are some little things you can ask yourself to know if sensory issues are related to some of the behaviors you're seeing? Okay, understand the environment, self-regulate, or seek avoid stimuli. Are they trying to accomplish any of those things by the behavior they're engaging in? Are they trying to get away from a person, a task avoidance, person avoidance, uncomfortable situations? What's making it uncomfortable? A lot of times crowds, even if it's a quiet environment, there's a lot of movement and fray and visual and people coming at me. There's so many things that can be overwhelming. Are they trying to obtain positive or negative attention? Or are they trying to get a preferred object or break? These are 4 very key questions you can ask to start looking for patterns of what's leading to your kid's behavior. And then kind of gives you a starting point for what to do about it. Okay, let's move on. So one of the senses that a lot of times these things are pretty overt if kids struggle. If my kids are very particular, they can't say anything wet or the water on their skin, even with a shower. It can be brushing teeth, brushing hair, but they don't want any gooey, ooey kind of thing going on. So when we're talking about the tactile sense, this is input to the brain about light touch, pain, temperature, and pressure. Do you have kids who don't sense hot and cold appropriately? Do you have kids who they're so tough, but almost to a point that it can be dangerous? Mm-hmm. Do you have others who are very sensitive, like, ow, if somebody barely touches them? These are signs of tactile processing not being quite right. They struggle to interpret these stimuli. It can be over or under sensitivity. But here's a big key, and this is important for safety and other reasons. We never want to force a person to touch something against their will. We do want to have sensory bends, have gradual increased exposure to things to up the tolerance and up their brain's ability to process, but you don't force it. Get their buy-in. So some ways to do this. One of the things I used to do when I was working with early childhood intervention is kids who were really picky eaters, or and by the way, eating is one of the most sensory explosive experiences you can have. Sight, smell, taste, texture. But I would sometimes put saran wrap or plastic wrap over food on their tray and then let them play with the food. I know, don't play with your food. If you have tactile aversions, this is a time to let them do it. If they have a barrier between them and their skin, or you can also use gloves. And they're more likely to try it because they don't have to worry about the sticky. They're not quite touching it. And some other little tips here. Start with dry items, then move to moist things that won't stick to their hands or feet. It's not just hands. You can have them stomping things. Sometimes kids are more willing to try things with their feet. I don't know if it's a little further away from their face. I can kind of pretend this isn't happening a little bit. There are little bumpy little cobblestone things that they can step on, even having them walk barefoot in the grass, but before advancing to messy play. You want to take it gradually and get their buy-in. But if we force kids on a different note to touch things that they don't want to touch, that might translate into some very unsafe things.
Yeah.
Where somebody's asking them to touch something or touching them and they think they have to allow it.
Right.
So not only to handle the emotional regulation component, but also for safety and well-being, looking at the big picture. All right, let's move on. I won't spend much time on this because by the way, anybody interested in any of these specific topics, I have done individual shows on each part of the sensory system. But I'm trying to focus today on some of the things that overlap and get confused with ADHD or get missed. They have ADHD, but they also have this going on.
Yeah.
But visual perception and processing, in the top left, what that is sort of demonstrating is you notice that this person is, without moving their head, they're able to look left and right. They're glancing.
Mm-hmm.
That is called VOR, vestibular ocular reflex. Let's say Jen is my teacher. I'm supposed to look at her. Something's going on over here in class. I'm curious about it. This visual perception ability allows me to glance with separating my eye movement from my head and body position to satisfy that curiosity. I kept my main mental focus on Jen because my head and body continued to face her. A lot of our kids cannot do this. It is equilibrium and visual perception working together. Something's going on over here that they want to check out. They turn their whole head or their whole body. And once I'm over here, that's where my focus goes. Now I'm distracted and this isn't happening anymore.
Yeah.
It looks exactly like ADHD. You can have both, or it can be either or, and this is getting missed. The two parts of the sensory system that I see get missed the most are equilibrium and visual perception issues. That was me. Doctors told my parents I was stupid and difficult. I had horrible, severe visual perception and processing and equilibrium issues. How long can you pay attention to reading if it looks double? This is not eyesight. You can have perfect 20/20 eyesight, but if the eyes don't team together, as I try to take the assignment from the chalkboard down to my planner, I lose part of that information. My eyes are jumping around. I have to work this hard to read when everybody else is working this hard.
Yeah, I can read very well, and that's very hard for me to read.
And I'm telling you, our eyes are supposed to just do these little sprints.
Yeah.
A lot of our kids are having to run races because their eye tracking is off. Things are getting discombobulated. It looks like they're having difficulty sounding out words. It can impact spelling. It impacts math. Their eyes jump around and they calculate the wrong digits. They can't keep their columns lined up. A plus sign becomes a times sign. Look at all this mumbo jumbo. I'm looking at the chalkboard and I'm only getting one sliver of it. See in the middle, that's the same chalkboard. That is called visual focus. Can I take in the whole thing or bits and pieces at a time? So many of our kids have this issue and it looks like they weren't paying attention. Why didn't you write that down? The teacher told you to. I didn't see it. I was right here. The assignment was over here. I am so busy. My brain is trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle of visual information. I can't pay attention to what the teacher's saying right now. So, so many things that look careless aren't. And I can tell you, when I had these issues going on, I would finish reading something. My entire brain fuel, my whole cognitive load got filled with what I missed, where was I? I'd finished reading a passage and I thought I was spacing out. That's what I called it. Mm-hmm. I'm just spacing out. I just wasn't paying attention. No, it was that all of my brain fuel went to making up for the fact that my eyes are jumping around and I have nothing left to get the content. Yeah. So these are just a few quick examples, but I have done very thorough shows on these things. Okay, let's move on. Body awareness. Okay. So many times, a lot of kids with ADHD have some social issues. They may not realize quite how they're coming across to others. They get emotionally dysregulated, but body awareness things can do the same thing. And these are sensations we get through our muscles, joints, tendons, connective tissues. Body awareness. Have you ever, Jen, have you ever taken a deep breath just out of the blue and you're like, why did I do that? That was random.
Yeah.
Your body awareness probably told you to do that. Our body awareness is reading the internal environment and sending us subconscious messages. Hey, you're about to get escalated. We don't feel escalated yet. Our emotions have only gone from a 0 to a 2 or 3. Yeah. We take that breath, we take a break, stretch our legs, get back to it. That doesn't even register as an emotional event.
Yeah.
Subconsciously,
I've had people ask me at work before if I'm okay, because I've been like doing that just naturally. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, oh, I guess I am thinking through a lot of things in my head right now. And I just started breathing.
Yes. And I mean, body awareness also, if I'm in touch with my emotions and my body, I feel my body the way I'm supposed to. I know when I'm happy, I smile, I feel myself. I know I'm relaxed and open. I see that in Jen, it's reinforcing. This is good. We're getting along. If I do not feel, my body, I miss that cue. I don't know that this means she's mad or I hurt her feelings and I need to redirect. So this can cause us to invade personal space. Lots of social emotional issues. This also decreases motivation often because I have to be in touch with my body before I get in touch with the deeper parts of what make me who I am. And once I know what I care about and what stirs my soul, I am intrinsically motivated to do something. I don't need a taskmaster to stay the course and get me redirected back to what I'm supposed to do. I don't know why this matters. I think it's dumb. Therefore, it's boring. So the brain cannot focus. I'm not having dopamine release with or without ADHD. Just so many things. I could go on and on. If you have kids who they really have hygiene issues, they don't realize that their body could smell better, or they forget to brush their teeth, or now if they kind of have big emotional outbursts about hair brushing and teeth brushing, that kind of thing, they might have a tactile sensitivity. If they are oblivious to why a shower matters and that deodorant, and please change your socks, they're standing on end. That was my that can be not being in touch with their bodies.
Yeah.
And by the way, handwriting, fine motor issues are extremely tied to ADHD. They are also tied to body awareness. How much thought do you put, Jen, into when you grab a pen to sign your name? Do you have to think about where you put your finger? How hard should I hold the pen? How hard should I press down? Zero. No. With body awareness, I don't feel that pen the way I'm supposed to. Even if my handwriting looks fine, I have to think about, am I holding it hard enough? Am I pressing down? Some kids will white knuckle it, then they get tired faster.
Yeah.
I could go on all of these. How do we grow body awareness? Work against resistance. Push-ups, chores, stirring, kneading dough, anything, hanging from monkey bars, anything where you are, it's called heavy work. You can also use TheraBands, those sort of rubbery things that you can use in place of weights.
Yeah.
That grows body awareness. You might need to tell kids what active listening means. Tell them what each part of their body does, because they're not in touch with that necessarily. You might have to explicitly state that. When we're talking about visual, if you have kids with visual perception issues, have them follow your finger, around without moving their head, closer, without moving their head.
Yeah.
Do mazes, crossword puzzles, find the word, I spy. Go on sensory walks. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, etc.
Yeah.
That is so regulating, gets kids present. It's regulating and sensory experience in the outdoors in a very relaxing way. And they're getting proprioceptive.
I love those listing type things for myself, because as a parent, even if I don't know if I might have adult onset ADHD, but a lot of it just feels like my thoughts get constantly interrupted by other people because I have 3 kids. And so some of it I feel like is just that, but
no,
so
I'm
often.
Just kidding. That does not happen.
Oh my gosh. But I feel like thinking about one thing I can see, one thing I can touch, one thing that I smell, even when I'm feeling just very frustrated with everything I have to do and everything that's on my mind, that's so helpful.
It is huge. That is not, I know people talk about mindfulness and then people just think it's a buzzword, and maybe it can be in some context, but if you have swirling thoughts, which is very associated with SPD and ADHD, the nice thing about mindfulness is you block everything else. Nothing exists except for this moment.
Yeah.
And deep breaths, they actually redistribute oxygen. It actually changes chemically what's going on inside your body. Okay, let's move on. All right. Equilibrium is the captain of the ship. It takes in, subconsciously processes information about gravity and motion. And then a person can say, okay, I got my bearings about me. Now let me start making sense of everything else. 68% of students described as underperformers in school, and this is based on enormous research of tens of thousands of students across the country from elementary all the way through high school. 68% have confirmed equilibrium issues if they are thought to be underperforming, and that does not count the ones who have not been assessed for it. And many of these kids, and I was among this number, they look extremely athletic. It doesn't mean there's no athletic prowess. It doesn't mean you're falling over on your face. It doesn't even mean you're dizzy. It means internally you don't feel grounded. You feel discombobulated. You just don't have your bearings about you. If you've ever had a head cold or sinus infection and you know that feeling of just being sort of swimmy, how much harder do you have to concentrate that day? The harder you have to concentrate, you're sprinting instead of in natural zone. You cannot sprint as long as you can jog.
Yeah.
So you're more tired. You can't concentrate as long. Equilibrium is very tied to heightened emotions, heightened anxiety, decreased concentration, very tied to difficulty following conversations or directions, especially with background noise, very tied to all parts of our visual perception and processing. This is extremely overlooked because it does not mean there's no athletic ability there. And it does not mean your kids are going to come to you and tell you they're dizzy. They might say they might hold their head when they're reading. I don't have my bearings. My subconsciously, the pressure I'm giving with my hand is getting me that bearings. If you have kids who lean over in their desk, do this, there's something usually going on visual perception wise or equilibrium wise. But if I don't have my bearings about me, you know what I might do? I'm going to pull back. I like my friends, but I get overwhelmed with them. A lot of times kids who have equilibrium issues will back into a wall at a party because that wall is their anchor. Very subtle. Whereas little ones might be holding on to mom or daddy's leg.
Yeah.
Here's my tree trunk right here, you know.
Yeah.
Motion seeking or avoidant, depending, that's modulation. Fatigue, this is very fatiguing. It impacts, I already talked about directions, but it impacts memory. Also, if I don't know where I'm in space, it's harder for me to follow spatial directions, like left, right, between, under, over, or if I have to go to different rooms and it's involving spatial concepts. This impacts reading, writing, math. All parts of school involve visual spatial concepts. Mental health, especially by the time you get to the tween-teen years, this is extremely tied to mental health issues. Part of that is thought to be because kids are like, what is wrong with me? It's supposed to be fun to hang out with my friends. Why am I overwhelmed? They're just that state of discombobulation. But swinging is a good way to reset the GPS. If I don't have my bearings about me with motion, swinging gives me a very constant thing that sort of is a GPS reset for so many kids. If your kid avoids swinging or are afraid of it, that also is a sign. Jumping on a trampoline, that's good for body awareness and equilibrium. Hula hoops, anything, ring around the rosy, musical chairs, things where they're having, and you stop and then you go again and you stop, you're feeling, I'm moving, now it's still. Moving, now I'm still. So many ways to work on it. Okay.
Oh, I love that.
Okay. Now, auditory processing is suspected with a lot of kids, but it often gets a lot of kids diagnosed with ADHD. That medical doctor I told you that I read this wonderful article she wrote, it turned out that her son had auditory processing challenges. There's more to auditory processing than sensitivity to it. There's more to it than I'm oblivious to the fact that you're talking to me. There is filtering out the extraneous and honing just in on the one I need. Even when we look at attention itself, we also have, there's switching attention, selected attention, so many different kinds that I've talked about before. Some kids have difficulty just with auditory or just with visual. Is it all the time, or is it just in certain realms? There's accuracy issues like we talked about with dyslexia, right? So think about, does it matter what mode of input is coming in, how much the attention is impacted? And keep in mind, even if there are multi things that impact attention, it still doesn't mean ADHD, because I could wrap off 12, 20, whatever, different things that can decrease attention or cause distractibility. It causes issues taking notes, poor verbal working memory. And by the way, a lot of experts in ADHD say really are framing ADHD as stemming from a working memory deficit. It is an issue of regulation. It is an issue of working memory, executive function. But regulation in general, regulating emotions, regulating attention. But so then we see auditory processing, poor verbal working memory, that mental sketch pad that I've talked about before, lashing out, trouble sequencing, difficulty following multi-step directions, doing them in order, time management, disorganized. I hear that a lot with our kids diagnosed with ADHD. Loud talker. A lot of times, why is my child yelling all the time, even when they're not mad? Because they are misperceiving the sound to be up to here, and they're talking over their perception of the sound.
Yeah.
You can also have low talkers and, really soft talkers. That can be social anxiety. I mean, there's selective mutism where there's no talking at all. That's not auditory processing, but it can also be that I am misperceiving. I don't realize how softly I'm talking. Mrs. Metalinguistic overlays. That means the prosody, the intonation, the stress patterns, all the different layered meanings we deliver in how we convey something with our tone of voice. Envelope, envelop. First, da-da-da. Next, da-da-da. If I can't hear those pauses, I don't get where the comma goes. I don't get that you gave me multi-step directions. And then it also impacts my literacy skills. Reading and spelling struggles. Seems rude. It could look like defiance. Auditory processing. They can be overwhelmed with sound. They don't realize what they sound like coming at you. All kinds of things that very much overlap. Okay. I love listening walks. Have kids pick up sounds and guess what it is. Is it a frog, a bird? And if they're, depending on their level, you can even try to hone it in on what kind of bird within reason. I mean, is that an owl? There are certain things that are more, or a woodpecker,
Obvious. Yeah.
But listening walks, where is it coming from? Have them close their eyes and say, play games where they're localizing sound. Localizing sound is important. One of the things that will get kids worked up is, hey, Johnny, look out. I don't know if they were saying that from over here behind me. I am freaking out because look out where. So many layers here. But I mentioned earlier that body focused repetitive behaviors in part can be a sensory thing. There are many things that go in here. It can be anxiety, which those often go hand in hand, but address the root cause. I think I've hit that nail on the head multiple times. But if you're an adult, self-monitor, depending on the child's age, maybe you need to help monitor, but log the frequency, the context in which they do the picking or the hair pulling or whatever it is. It can be nose picking. I mean, there are anything it's a repetitive behavior that's body focused. And what are the patterns? And then habit reversal. You want to increase their awareness of it. What have you found out by logging these things? Teach them to use an incompatible behavior when the urge arises. So for example, if they're picking their skin at night, something incompatible would be to wear gloves. Or anytime they catch themselves picking, depending on their age, if they're little, give yourself a pat on the back. Anything where you're replacing one with another.
Yeah.
You can also have your kids do intentional motor behavior, like have them run an errand, run out to the garage, anything where it's intentional motor movement to replace that habitual sort of thing that's often subconscious. But praise them when they catch themselves. Don't scold them when they don't, but do praise them when they catch themselves and replace the behavior. It's always better to replace one behavior with another than it is to say, don't do that or don't think that.
What's your suggestion? I don't know if it's a similar thing, but a lot of time my son gets like verbal tics where he's constantly clicking or something. Can you do
Yeah.
the same thing with this? Like anytime you
Yes.
notice you're doing that, press on
Anytime
your
it's
pockets
doing,
or something?
yeah, anytime you're doing that, I mean, I know a lot of families aren't big on gum, but if they're not ones to get it stuck places, I'm going to tell you, chewing gum actually serves a lot of purposes. That is proprioceptive input. If your kids have the rooting reflex, one of our infant survival mechanisms, we sometimes test high schoolers or adults who still have that. So
Yeah.
it can help get rid of that. And that reflex impacts manual dexterity. And sometimes it's associated with speech delays, articulation errors, stuttering, picky eating, making food choices based on texture, overfilling mouth. If any of those describe your child, chewing gum can help. It is good for increasing concentration. And replace that with chewing gum. You can get sugar-free or whatever, but
Yeah.
I know chewing gum gets a certain reputation.
Yeah.
It serves a lot of good purposes.
Okay.
So that's just an example. Or
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, replace one with another, and usually a lot of times something in the same realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can be good. That's why I said the gum you're giving him something else specific to do with his tongue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the patting the back. I like the patting. Pat your back.
Yeah.
Good job.
It can be something funny, silly, or meaningful, something purposeful,
I love that. All right. So you've got lots of tools to kind of sift through here, but if you are looking for a place to get assessed, have your child assessed, we have programs for adults and children. I cannot tell you how much these programs help. Here are the phone numbers, the places you can follow. Do you have any other lives this week?
Yes. Dr. Brian and I will be back Thursday at 1. And I also will just mention real quick that I am sending out a Heather's Help newsletter each week with the help of the awesome C4 team. Has tons of very implementable real life strategies, not when parent of the word and do this parent of the year award. It's like very practical, doable things.
Yeah.
And just go to our pages to check that out, sign up. You can message us if you don't see the video where you can sign up. But I think our families are really enjoying that. So
I absolutely love it. Heather, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, if you have questions or you're watching this on the replay, please feel free to drop them in the comments section. We will always get back to you and answer your questions, and maybe it'll become a topic for our next show. So anything else to add, Heather, before we say our goodbyes?
No, that's it. Thank you so much, Jen. I'm grateful for you, and thank you to everyone who watched. I hope you have a great week.
Yes, agreed. Bye, everybody.
Bye.